Sports Analyst F1 here. I've bet on the Formula 1 professionally for the last 7 years, accumulating over 6 years of profit in that time, and this is my Chinese GP analysis. Right, I'm going to keep this episode really short, so I'm going to start off by talking about the bets I took throughout the race week. So on screen now you see the selections that I placed. So starting off the weekend, £600, Science to beat Lawson at 1.5 and FP1. Just feel like Lawson hasn't got to grips with that Red Bull yet, so I thought that was a nice price. Next sort of major selection we've got is Piastri top 2 in the sprint race. Just feel like McLaren's got a bit of a buffer to the next sort of cars around them on qualifying and race pace, and I felt like around a track that's quite open, that favours the car's sort of outright pace and not so much the technical ability of the driver, I felt like 1.8 to come top 2 was a nice price also. Then the next sort of bets that didn't go too well, we had £1,100 on McLaren's fastest lap in the sprint. Now I just felt like McLaren had the fastest package, and I felt like they would qualify on pole and therefore have that free air to take that fastest lap. Unfortunately, both of the McLaren drivers bottled their lap in qualifying. Unfortunately, Hamilton built a gap on the first 1 or 2 laps, put a strong lap in, and because there was so much tyre deg on the Saturday that all the drivers were looking after their tyres, so they didn't want to put a quick lap in. So Hamilton's lap on lap 1 or 2 stood, unfortunately for me. So he lost a bit of money there. Then do a knock on to beat Lawson and that in the sprint. I just felt like Lawson wasn't up to speed yet, so I was taking angles on him. So yeah, that's why I took those selections. Then we had the win margin bets. Just felt like those were a nice price, and I felt like towards the end in Q3 of qualifying it would be under 0.1 because the cars are so tightly packed, and the last few qualifyings have been under 0.1, so I felt 2.88, hedging it against the over 0.2 market, which 365 and a lot of other betting companies felt like that was the strongest outcome. I just felt like it was more likely to be under 0.2, so getting good odds there. Piastri top 3 each way. Again, I just feel like on this track around China, bit more of a open track, less technical than most circuits in my opinion, and I feel like Norris has the advantage of Piastri on more technical circuits. So around a more open circuit, I favour Piastri at nicer odds, so we took that as well. Next big bets we had, unfortunately, was on Gasly to reach Q2 and Q3. Now, the reason I took these bets was because in qualifying, on the sprint qualifying, he had his lap blocked by Yuki coming out the pit, so he lost 3 or 4 attempts, he said in his driver interview in the first turn. And if you subtract that away his time, that would have brought him into around the Q3 threshold. So I thought he had a bit more pace in hand, just based on his driver interview. And obviously last race as well, he reached Q3, so there's obviously some pace in the car. So I felt taking that angle, because I don't think that bookies read too much into it, we were going to take that. But unfortunately, in qualifying, a lot of the other cars had improved their car between the sprint and the qualifying, and the Alpine wasn't quite as strong as Gasly was expecting. Unfortunately, I got Chin there, and he came 0.07 away from Q2, so I lost quite a bit of money there, and that would have made me an extra 2k on the weekend. That just crept in, so that was a bit unfortunate. Yuki Q3, that AlphaTauri is really, really good in the rotation corners, the slower corners. Seems like a natural characteristic of his car. I'll be interested to see whether that will carry it over onto slower speed circuits, and whether it's just a setup sort of specific thing, or whether it is a car characteristic that will apply on slower speed circuits. So yeah, there was actually quite a lot of corners at a slower speed around the Chinese GP circuit, so they were looking good all weekend. And they've obviously got a good package there. So for a 2.1, when he was getting 1.5 for points at that point, I thought just to reach Q3 at basically double the price, that was a nice value bet. Alonso to beat Sainz in qualifying. Sainz has been off it all weekend. Alonso was quite comfortable in the car and happy with the car, so I felt that was a good price for qualifying. Then we had Piastri race winner for the race. Now, one thing I picked up on was in the sprint race that it was really hard to overtake because the tyre management was a key factor, and overheating the tyres was massive. So track position was massive, and I felt at 2 odds Piastri leading the race. I didn't see him getting overtaken by Norris, who started 3rd, and I felt like I had the pace on Russell to overtake him if he did get jumped at the start. start. So for those reasons, I felt 2 odds was a really nice price, so I had a nice little bet there. Then Norris over Piastri and McLaren double podium. Similar sort of logic, just McLaren should have a pace advantage if they could get the car into a nice window, which they did. And then Ferrari top 6. Leclerc starting 6th, and then we had Hadjar, the rookie, in 7th. And I just felt like Hadjar wasn't having enough pace to overtake Leclerc and stay in that position. And I felt like Antonelli back in 8th, I believe he was at that point, wasn't going to have the race pace of the Ferrari. So you're basically just getting 1.8 for both Ferraris to finish. And I thought that was a lovely bet. Also, additionally, you've got to take into account that the chance for safety car was very low, and is very low around the Chinese GP track, especially when there's no rain about, because it's quite an open circuit and there's not too many gravel traps around. So you're more likely just going to get a clean race, and that's not going to get too much safety cars to jump up the order. So just top 6 of both Ferraris was basically going to land. The less safety car came out. And because that safety car was less likely, you're getting a nice angle there for a good price. So we took that. Then, unfortunately, again, we had McLaren fastest lap in the race. Now, I got a bit unlucky here. They had the fastest package, and basically we just needed all the cars to go into the same sort of strategy. But unfortunately, McLaren ended up doing a 1-stop when the hard tyres were just lasting a long time, because on the Sunday there was a lot of cloud coverage. So you had half the grid doing a 2-stop and then half the grid going into a 1-stop. And unfortunately, the sun just didn't come out enough, and that led us to McLaren going into a 1-stop, and then the 2-stoppers obviously just put a fastest lap in, so Hamilton ended up taking that, unfortunately. So that was quite unlucky there. Doing to beat Bort and Bear. Obviously, Haas last race was just shocking, so I felt like Doohan would have the pace on Behrman, and also Bortoleto as well. Unfortunately, Haas did a lot of performance increase, and Behrman ended up putting a solid race in, so that lost. And then for the same sort of reason as the safety car, the overclassified finish market was getting a good price just because last race there's a lot of DNFs and non-classifiers, but that was just because of the rain in the first race for the rookies. But on a track like China, where it's more open on a dry track, it's quite a comfortable race for the cars, and therefore you need a lot of cars finishing. So I felt like 1.8 was a very nice price, and we took a nice little bet on that. So yeah, we also had Yuki to beat Hadjar over the race. Now, Hadjar's had no race distance under his belt, obviously DNF'd last race on the formation lap. So this is technically his first race miles in the car, apart from the sprint race. And effectively, on a track where tyre management is quite key, I felt like Yuki over the race distance was comfortably going to beat him and do the better job. So we took that, and Yuki jumped him at the start. He was in front of him the whole race, and then his front wing just capitulated out of nowhere. So I don't know how that lost, but it did. So that wasn't ideal either. So basically, if you imagine that Gasly did a slightly better lap, went 0.08 quicker in his qualifying lap. Yuki's front wing just didn't disintegrate out of nowhere. There was a bit more sun, so that all the cars went onto a 2-stop, and then also a McLaren didn't bottle their lap in sprint qualifying to land our fastest lap in the race, because they would have had free air. If you account for all those factors, there's 5k just gonna miss. So that's a bit unfortunate. It could have been a nice weekend, but unfortunately we're gonna have to set up a small profit.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always if right. If my mom had balls, she would be my dad. So, yeah.
That is my race bets.
Now, I want to bring your attention to Race Ready T-shirts, a new clothing store I've been working on Etsy. The store aims to bring you practical, trendy and quality F1 and motorsport related clothing from an affordable price point that gets you race ready. Whether you're watching the comfort of your own home or supporting your favourite driver at the track, Race Ready T-shirts will get you in the vibe with some crisp, unique designs. Note, all items are unisex clothing, and you can enjoy a 15% discount when you order 3 or more items at once. On the left, we've got some Lewis Hamilton themed Ferrari t-shirts for 2025, which are in demand. And on the right, my personal favourite, the Track Collection t-shirts. Link in description.
Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the learnings that I took from the Chinese GP, and in particular, the sprint race. Obviously, the sprint races are quite a new feature in Formula 1, coming in 2 years ago, I believe. So there's not a whole lot of sort of data to go by and past races to analyse. So the bookies are quite fresh to the sprint races, and obviously so am I. So in particular, I want to talk about the fastest lap in the sprint race. That's the angle that I'm looking at here. In particular, now on Saturday I think, or Friday when the sprint race was, you saw that Hamilton, as he was the leading car, he set the fast lap on lap 1 or 2, and that just held for the whole race. Now, looking into it a little bit more, on a track where the tyre management is going to be king for that stint, it's going to be massive, the tyre management. On a track where there's long radius corners, where the dirty air is going to kill your tyres, the car in front is going to have a huge advantage. And this won't be like this on all tracks. For example, Austria, you want a bit of a slipstream to be able to set the fast lap. That's another venue where you have a sprint race weekend. So I'm just looking at tracks in particular where tyre wear is massive and where there's long radius corners. And in these instances, I think the car in front to set the fast lap is a big cert. So on screen now, you can see the analysis note that I was writing to myself so that I can remember for the future and it to be a bit more embedded in my knowledge. And it is important to note this sort of angle is only going to be relevant where the cars are very similar in pace at the front of the field. Like at the moment where, like it's only a couple of tenths or a tenth between the car paces at the front. As soon as you get a larger pace delta between the different teams, you're going to be able to overtake a lot easier, and this won't be as applicable. So this is maybe something for this current set of rule regulations for the rest of the year. Maybe next year, if there's a larger delta at the front in terms of the team's pace, then this will be less relevant. But it's good to sort of know for future sprint races, if you've got that similar car speed at the front, then this is an angle that you could probably likely take, or is going to be very likely to come in. And you're probably going to get around even odds for the fastest car at the front as well, so that's a nice price at those odds. So it's something to try and remember and learn from for next time and in future races. So I thought I'd write that down to myself, and that will sort of embed my knowledge for the future, basically. So that's that. Right, now let's jump into the SAF1 Championship. So on screen you can see the rules if you don't know how it all works already. Basically just ranking the drivers based on their driving ability, not how quick the car is. So we're factoring in subjectively how quick I think the car is, and then just ranking each driver on merit based on the driving performance in comparison to one another. And this should give you guys who I think's been the best performing driver over the course of the season, and how each driver stacks up in comparison to one another. So there's the rules on screen, and these now on screen are my rankings for the Chinese GP. So we're going to very quickly run through each of the drivers, giving you my thoughts on each of them. Verstappen said he performed pretty mega lap to stick at P2 in SQ. Tried a bit to apply some pressure on Hamilton in the sprint race, overcooked his tyres and fell into P3, but gave it a good try, so not going to downgrade him too much there. Then in the race, solid lap to end up P4, decided to run his own race at this point because he tried to outperform the pace of his car in the sprint race, and that lost him some position. So he just ran his own race, wasn't very quick on the mediums. When he went to the hards was basically the leader's pace and McLaren's pace, so ended up running his own race, and then that managed to make him catch up to the clerk and overtake him towards the end. So very solid weekend from Verstappen when that car is not ideal at all. So he's just making the most of it, going about his business and picking up the points. So yeah, Verstappen again, 2 weeks in a row, the best driver in my opinion. Russell also a sick performance yet again. Did really well in Australia and also done very well in this race as well. Fifth in sprint qualifying, which was a bit underwhelming, but that's probably well about the car's paces. Came in with fourth, so got in front of the clerk in the sprint race, sorry. So solid performance there. Then did a mega lap to go P2 in quali and brought it home for a nice podium. So I thought just behind Verstappen, that was a fair reflection of his performance in the weekend. Then Piastri did a really good weekend all weekend. However, opted for a push in SQ, and they ended up 0.08 shy of pole in the sprint qualifying. So needed a better lap there. Moved up to P2, but I just felt that when you've got the best car, you've got to be taking pole and winning both sort of races when you've got the best car to be able to put you first in my rankings, Piastri. So drop you down to third just for that reason. If you converted the sprint race, you probably would have been nearer the top. But still, third position for Piastri, picking up some nice points. Albon takes fourth. Yet again, a very strong performance for Albon after, I think he picked up third last race. So again, good performance from Albon. He's obviously getting the better of his teammate Sainz at this current time. So he was stuck at P9 in SQ. Dropped back to P11 in the sprint race, so that wasn't the best. But I think the Williams this weekend, drivers are talking about the circuit's sort of less suited to them because of the long radius corners. Then that was just putting a bit more heat into their tyres That was something they've struggled with in the past. So I don't think their car was as strong as the first race. But regardless, Albon was knocking at the front of the midfield all weekend, and in the qualifying stuck it just behind the AlphaTauris and then did a nice one stop, but ended up staying out too long on the one stop, which lost him a bit of race time because he thought that the harder tyres would disintegrate more than they did. So he lost a bit of race time staying out too long, but regardless, brought it home in a net P9. I think it got upgraded to P7 though, because obviously both the Ferraris got disqualified. So just basically second behind Ocon in the midfield. So he was knocking in on the top 10 all weekend and drove phenomenally, I thought. So that's brought him the 4th place. Then we've got Ocon. Ocon had a poor performance in the sprint and qualifying, but then got the car into a strong window for the race and qualifying. Stuck at P11 on the grid and then drove a really nice one stop to even finish in front of Antonelli in the race. And the reason the Haas has massively seen in performance increase this race is because it's the higher speed corners it's the change of direction in the higher speed corners is where they're massively lacking, and that was really exploited in Australia because there's a lot of high speed change directions. But in China, the higher speed change directions are more fluid, more slower, more progressive, so that hasn't really hampered their car so much. But watch out for Haas in the corners where they've got high speed change direction. That's where their real kryptonite is, and that's where they lack performance massively. It's sort of like a blip in their aerodynamic car package. So watch out for that. But on this track, they've got their heads around it, and it hasn't hampered them too much. Hamilton, obviously lovely to see him take his first win in red. That was very surprising to see after the first race, the performance being so little, but I felt like one of the McLarens would have had the pace advantage if they just got a lap in. But it was really nice to see Hamilton take his first win in red. A bit of a surprise for it to come so soon, to be honest with you, so that was really nice to see. Obviously wins the race, and really surprising they changed the balance of their car. See, he had a good balance going into the sprint. He obviously won and then decided to massively change their car, it seemed like, or at least tweak their car, and it made a lot of difference for Hamilton's ability to drive that car pretty quickly in the race. So surprising that they've managed to change the car that much and it made that much of a worse difference. Maybe the other cars had improved slightly, but yeah, pretty poor to say the least. Otherwise Hamilton would have been further up on my rankings this race because that was a nice drive in the sprint, but couldn't back up in the race. Lancey Boy coming home P8 for my rankings. Did out-qualify Alonso in the sprint, then qualified right behind his teammates in qualifying, and then drove a really nice one-stop, keeping Behrman behind, even with a slower car, well, slower performance at least. But he drove a nice one-stop, I thought, and yeah, after I didn't give him any points last race in Australia when he did get a bit lucky at the safety car, I thought he had a really decent performance all weekend, and to get P8 for Lancey Boy is a nice result for him. So Ollie Behrman to take 9th on my rankings. Really good job in the sprint, outdid Ocon in the sprint and the sprint race. Then a poor qualifying, coming home into 17th in qualifying, which wasn't ideal, but then drove a nice one stop with that Haas car performing pretty well in the race to bring him home a point actually. However, we did lock up trying to overtake Stroll, which did hamper his race time slightly, so have downgraded him a little bit for that. But I thought, yeah, on that weekend to bring it home in the points and have a decent performance in the sprint, outperforming his teammate, I thought 9th place was relevant for him. Then for 10th place, I've given it to Hadjar because he did stick at P7 in qualifying, which was a lovely lap, and then so yeah, the racing bulls went early on to 2-stop, thinking everyone else would follow suit. And that hampered their race massively because the hard tyre was holding together and not graining. So I have actually missed out Yuki. I completely forgot about Yuki. He came in 6th for my rankings. Strong result in qualifying, best of the rest in the sprint qualifying, shall I say. Then converted it for P6 in the sprint. Really nice job. He even beat Norris in the sprint, which was a good result for him. Did get out qualified by his teammate in Q3 of actual qualifying, but then did jump him at the start and was running a nice race for, like I said, the Racing Bulls. Put him onto a 2-stop early, which was the wrong decision in hindsight, but he didn't really have too much of an opinion on that one, I don't think. So lovely driving Yuki, obviously just front wing disintegrated, so I'm not going to rate him down for that. But yeah, strong result from Yuki 2 weeks in a row to give him a 6th spot. And close contenders for points, I thought Leclerc and Gasly, which were just outside my points this race week. And then Lawson, unfortunately, qualified P20 in both qualifyings. Obviously, he's not adapted to the car, and the car is massively suited around Verstappen, so give him a little bit of leeway, but I feel like he's just pooing his pants, to be honest, and performing a lot worse than he could. And to bring it home P20 in both qualifyings, there's no excuse for that. So -3, and he might even be taken out for next race. There's a lot of talk that Yuki's going to replace him at his home race in Suzuka, so that's a possibility. So maybe he'll lose a seat, but more likely get swapped back into the Racing Bulls. So after 2 races, these are the current standings. Verstappen at the top with maximum points over 2 races. Russell, Albon, Yuki performing really strongly. We've had Norris had 1 strong race in Australia, but then didn't register in China. And then similar for Piastri, had a really strong weekend in China, but didn't register in Australia. And then Ocon, Hulk, Lewis, and Pierre Gasly rounding off the top 10. Lovely jubbly. So, if you want to keep up to date with my bets, if you want some of my bets, I've got a free tips group, link in the description, where I post 1 tip a race. And then also, if you're interested in the premium group, you can go over to my Instagram, link in the description as well, and drop me a message. Next race in 2 weeks' time for the Japanese GP. Till next time. See you later.